Welcome to Words Carry Us, an ongoing series of live stream events featuring readings and interviews from Greenkill in Kingston, New York. I'm Betty MacDonald, writer, storyteller, and host of Words Carry Us. Before I introduce our guest tonight, I'll begin the evening reading from my work. This one is called, I Live in the Woods Like Snow White. I'm lucky to live in the woods like Snow White, surrounded by flora and fauna, and no dwarfs. I'm not talking about little people, but I prefer my own company to Happy Dopey Doc and those guys. The birds and chipmunks scamper about, but don't do chores like they do in the movie. I've had a turned off week. I got caught up binging a series on Netflix about two families in Halifax visited by one life-altering crisis after another. Now I think in a Yorkshire accent. This is called The Breeze is Like a Lover's Hands. Struggling through the stifling blanket of August humidity, like a trek through an equatorial jungle, mildew heavy on the air, my fingers stick to the keyboard. Now the last day of summer opens to the golden light of fall. My fingers glide like ice dancers. The breeze feels like a lover's hand. This piece is called In the Town of My Second Childhood. In the town of my second childhood, the famous restaurant became a bank. The bank, a gallery. The building that housed the free store, gone. Not just the free store, the whole building, gone. Demolished long ago for some reason I wouldn't have agreed with. We must be moving closer to the sun, my potted plants crispy from sunstroke, geraniums gasping, nasturtiums limp and slumping. What a responsibility to keep things alive. Cross the bridge, turn right into the driveway, around the curve, the studio where I used to work. In front, Goliath's foot. Goliath's foot in white hydra stone. 4 feet from heel to toe, 3 feet tall to the ankle, maybe 4. The house where my kids grew up, upgraded. New siding, new foundation. The house had no foundation when we lived there. It sat on the ground, moldering. The foundation I provided wasn't so solid either. The creek meanders, rushes or roars depending on rainfall and what locks they open upstream, changing little over time, except when the engineers recarved the bank after Deirdre's house, hoisted by the flood, transformed into a boat. It floated a full 200 feet until it hit the Bearsville Bridge. Doors and door frames broke apart. Walls and ceilings fell into the swirling water. No sign of books, beds, dishes, anywhere. Way downstream, almost to town, the kitchen sink surfaced. If only I'd stayed around to see that, but I was gone by then, afraid I'd be stranded as the water flowed across the driveway, etching deep craters. Awash with water, awash with rain, I carried our meditative dog in my arms through the rushing water. Her glossy black head nestled against my yellow slicker. She would have followed me on her own if I'd put her down, but I needed her close. Holding her in my arms, I whispered encouragement into her silky ear, while my tall rubber boots filled with water. The mud sucked the boot clear off my foot. I stepped into the icy depth to retrieve it. The next day, the water returned to its former contour, restrained between the banks of the stream. No trace of Deirdre's house, no foundation, no plumbing pipes, nothing. Nothing but a wrought iron railing next to 3 cement steps leading nowhere. Tonight's guest on Words Carry Us live stream is Andrea Kantrowitz, Associate Professor of Art Education at SUNY New Paltz. Andrea Kantrowitz, artist and educator, has lectured and led workshops on art and cognition internationally. She was a teaching artist in New York City schools, public schools, for many years, involved in multiple local and national research projects that demonstrated the positive academic impact of an integrated art curriculum for students growing up in poverty. She holds a doctorate in art education and cognitive studies from Columbia University Teachers College, an MFA in painting from Yale, a BA in art and cognition from Harvard, an MFA in painting from Yale, and a BA in art, sorry. She's associate professor and director of art education programs at the State University of New York in New Paltz. Her paintings have been exhibited nationally and are in many private collections. This evening, Andrea will introduce her amazing, newly released book, Drawing Thought. I'm delighted to welcome Andrea Kantrowitz to Words Carry Us. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Betty. I'm honored to be here.
And I'm delighted as well. So, you have this new book out.
I do.
And it's so beautiful. And I noticed that there are words in the drawings and there are words added to the drawings. Mm-hmm. How come?
Well, I'm really a drawer first, as I think a lot of people are, actually. A lot of children, one of the first things they do is they start scribbling and making drawings. And in the process of drawing, it's almost as if the drawings whisper to you what they are as they are becoming. So a lot of the words that you see in the drawings kind of emerge from that process. It's like a conversation that you have with your work. I was thinking, actually, well, can I just say,
yes.
When I was listening to your poetry, I was thinking about how writing a poem or even listening to a poem is a lot like making a drawing, in that you take us on a journey and we don't really know at the beginning where we're going to end up at the end. And it's this, So I was just thinking about, as I was listening to your poetry, how it feels like making a drawing.
I like that. That's nice. And tell me about the thinking hand.
Okay. So I guess one of the main ideas of the book is that drawing can elicit ideas, thoughts that we don't even know we have. So very often we think we know more than we actually do. We overestimate our intelligence. That's a systematic cognitive error that pretty much all of us make. But drawing helps to introduce us to all that we know that we don't even realize that we know. And that knowledge does come through our hands. So as humans, we were really evolved to think with our hands. So let me see if I have a reading about that. Do you want me to read that?
Yes, I would like to hear that.
Okay. So drawing, the thinking hand. Drawing helps us take advantage of the ways we can use our hands to observe, discover, and invent. Human hands are capable of an astounding range of deliberate and reflexive actions. The movements of our fingers and wrists can be both powerful and precise, especially when they are well coordinated with the movements of our arms and shoulders. At our fingertips, we possess a remarkably detailed and subtle sense of touch. We make and use tools with our hands. Hand gestures help us think and communicate in important ways. Drawing integrates tool use with our abilities to think and communicate symbolically through gesture. When we move a pen or pencil across the drawing surface, we leave the traces of our movements behind to be re-examined and revised later on.
I love the pictures, the drawing, with the tools coming out of the fingers. It so captures me. I love that. I love that feeling.
Well, when we take a pencil, it actually literally gets mapped onto the part of our brain that it literally becomes an extension of our hand. Right. And I think that once you gain some experience drawing, it's just second nature. So,
when I was sculpting, I used to imagine that the tools were part of my hand, were extensions of my fingers. And I think that's why I love those drawings so much.
Thank you.
So did you always draw? Did you start drawing as a child? Were you from an artistic family?
Well, I think I was from a family that really valued expression and creativity and exploration and invention. So I had an older sister, though, that was 10 years older than me. And I just thought she was wonderful, and I just tried to do everything that she did. So when she was really into drawing as a teenager, and my mother kept this drawing of a still life that she did, which was, a talented 14-year-old's drawing, and then my 4-year-old version of it. So I think a lot of that role model was really important to me growing up.
Your sister as a role model.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also have to say, my mother allowed me to draw on the walls.
She did?
Yeah, and she came from a family of free thinkers, so I think I was encouraged, and that really had an impact.
That's amazing. I let my children draw on the walls, but I felt that I was negligent. But So you drew as a child. Did you always want to be an artist, or were you a writer, or the writing came from the art?
Yeah, for me, art, that's really, I have to think about that question for a second. Yes, I always loved to draw, and I always was interested in thinking. So I think for me, the connection between drawing and thinking was primary. Maybe before wanting to be an artist, I was interested in how we think through drawing, the kinds of thinking that drawing allows us to do.
And how did that come into your work with children in New York when you were teaching drawing?
I think that there's a sense of ownership if you can, I'm just going to repeat to you this quote that I remember from a fourth grader that I worked with in the Bronx. And he said, it's like, I never realized before that art is not just about making pretty things, but it's about science and social studies and history and how everything is all connected. And I think that that's why, for me, it goes beyond art. It's really about being fully human and taking being empowered by that experience of connection.
Connection, ability to draw. Do you have to have talent to draw?
That's one of the things I hear the most often. It's like, oh, I just don't have talent. People feel that they don't have talent, and it really doesn't matter. Like, I don't draw like Leonardo da Vinci. I don't, it's like, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't enrich my life tremendously. So yeah, there is talent, but it's really about the process and the journey that drawing takes you on, and it's not about the final result. So I think when people say, I can't draw a straight line, I say, why would you want to?
My mother used to say that, and she drew perfectly wonderful curved lines. Mm-hmm. But if you said anything to her about drawing, she would say, I can't draw a straight line. But she did a lot of very creative things.
Right, it's the messy stuff that kind of gets you somewhere. The straight lines aren't necessarily so interesting.
Not particularly,
yeah.
No. They're just straight lines.
Right.
So how do words and images convey meaning and communicate in different ways?
Well, I think one of the things I learned from studying cognitive science and talking to cognitive scientists is that our thoughts are really not so discrete and specific as words can be. That they're messy, there's ambiguity, things are changing all the time, and our perceptions are very messy, and drawing allows us to get some of that fuzzy stuff down and see what develops out of it. So the pre-verbal or non-verbal kinds of thinking that we can do through drawing without being sort of pinned down to words.
Oh, so it frees you.
Yeah, it allows you to kind of live with uncertainty and ambiguity and let things be kind of undefined until through the process they come into sharper focus.
So tell me a little about circling around understanding.
So when I was first thinking about this book or thinking about the research that was behind this book, I went and talked to different artists. And one of my friends, David Brody, that I knew in college, I went and interviewed him in the studio, and we were talking about how decades later, how we still are so involved in the same ideas that we had when we were like 18. And he said, we're always perpetually circling around understanding. So he gave me that phrase, which we never really know. Things are always in the process of change. So at the beginning of the book, the prelude to the book, I tried to kind of get to what, for me, the experience of drawing is. Drawing, I locate my thoughts, myself, in time and space. Marks on paper connect inner and outer worlds. Observing, I draw in the world, becoming aware of the place in which I find myself. Sounds, smells, the temperature of the air. When looking back at my sketchbooks, days, weeks, even many years later, I feel the breeze on my cheek, hear the conversation at the next table, the dog barking in the distance. I notice details I was not conscious of at the time. A child quizzically looking up at her dad, an unseen passageway. From inside my own mind, I draw out images, fuzzy and indistinct at first, slowly taking shape on the surface before me. Ideas, feelings, memories, and insights I didn't know I had appear on the page. I play, exploring forms, pulling them apart, and putting them back together again. Vague impressions coalesce. I layer and revise lines and shapes until something unforeseen emerges.
It's wonderful to get into your mind, into your process. I'm a swim in these images. Talk to me about imaginary friends.
Okay. Well, I think there's what I've learned from cognitive science is that there's a lot of innate predispositions of the human mind that sort of evolved to solve certain kinds of questions of survival. but that actually when we become aware of them and conscious of them, we can use them for our own purposes. So drawing helps us harness the tendency of the human mind to perceive order, pattern, meaning in seemingly random events. The human imagination is a byproduct of the drive to discover patterns of cause and effect in the natural world. Observation, discovery, and invention are close companions. Our imagination fill in the gaps, sometimes without even our realizing it. When there may be a saber-toothed tiger in the bushes or a snake in the grass, better jump to conclusions, respond immediately, and be wrong because you think you see one, than not notice it and be wrong. But within the safety of the drawing surface, we can slow down and enjoy the possibilities uncertainty unleashes. Drawing allows us to explore our mistakes. Marks and the gaps in between leave room for reinterpretation and inference. By regrouping and recombining parts, new possibilities emerge. Ambiguity can suggest multiple alternative meanings. There are many stories that could be told.
I'm so impressed with the drawings in your book. I've only gotten about halfway through it, but I'm so drawn by it. How did you start drawing this book first, or did you write about it first, or did it all happen together?
That is a really good question. I have to say that the drawings came first, and I started as a kind of morning meditative ritual of drawing, and then allowing the ideas to emerge as I drew. And that's why on many of the earlier drawings you see these little notes that are sketched into the drawings. Yeah.
So you were meditating with the intent of starting this book, or was that spontaneous from the meditation?
Well, I did a doctorate at Columbia, in where I'd been talking to artists and really thinking about what is it that artists' way of thinking, and particularly the way that artists think through drawing, has something to offer everyone. It's not just for artists. And I'd been lecturing and doing workshops and talking to people about this, and so I was asked to do a book.
Someone asked.
Someone said, they said, a publisher came to me and said, "Do you want to do a book?" And I said, "Of course I do."
How could you say no?
Yeah, right. And I thought, oh, this will take me like a summer. I can do this. I know this stuff. And it's like 4 years later. And
4 years it took.
Here.
That was the next question.
Yeah, but it was, but that's how I started. I just started making drawings and drawing every day and thinking about how all the many different ways of drawing. And I tried to incorporate that in my book. So drawing from imagination, drawing from observation, drawing in, every kind of way I could think of. So, yeah.
So tell me about thinking space.
So one of the things that I also learned through the cognitive science and is that the importance of spatial reasoning. And it's been associated with creativity across a whole range of disciplines, in STEM disciplines, because of course everybody cares about STEM disciplines, but in art and design and across the board. And I'm really interested in the way that drawing can enable spatial reasoning. So the blank page can be a physical extension of our minds. We draw out 2- and 3-dimensional models of real and invented objects, actors, and scenes, pull them apart, and put them together again in new ways. Spatial reasoning is the ability to retain, retrieve, generate, and transform visual images in the mind. Analogy is compared to phenomena as a way to understand one, the target, by identifying common features it shares with another, more familiar phenomenon, the source. Both spatial and analogic reasoning rely on our ability to perceive deep structural relationships between superficial appearances. We sometimes say we need to turn things over in our mind when we feel the need to analyze a subject thoroughly. We want to get on top of a situation, cover a topic, uncover the facts, or put something to the side. Spatial analogies permeate our thinking so completely that we usually don't even notice them. Drawing is all about the relationships and movement of forms in space.
So the blank page sometimes overcomes us with its blankness. Do you have that happen to you?
Well, what I recommend, I don't know that I'm so intimidated by the blank page anymore. I just scribble.
There was a time.
Maybe, I don't know. You know what? Honestly, I don't think I ever stopped scribbling. I think, watching my own children, babies, start scribbling almost as soon as they can hold a pencil. And I think that's when I started, and I never stopped. So I never learned to be afraid of the blank page. And that's my advice to others, too, is that if you're afraid of the blank page, like close your eyes, hold your pencil, close your eyes, and just start
draw
scribbling.
without looking.
Yeah. And then see what's there. And chances are there's something really interesting that you can pull out of that scribble. You
could find something interesting.
Everybody can. That's part of our human equipment, is that we see, the way people see, Jesus on a piece of grilled cheese or whatever it is, we have that ability to see things in random phenomena. So, yeah, Da Vinci talked about that. It's looking, if you don't have any ideas, look at clouds and the smoke and the stains on walls. And that's where ideas come from.
Ideas.
Yeah.
From stains on walls.
Yeah.
From clouds.
He said it first.
So, I guess you've already answered this, but
Okay.
Why draw?
So there's many reasons to draw. But this is from the last page of the book. The final answer for now, the temporarily final answer, is that drawing offers a way to cultivate deeper knowledge of our own internal thoughts and of the world in which we find ourselves. We discover that there is so much more to observe and reveal than initially meets the eye. We come to realize that we know and understand less than we think we do, but at the same time we gain access to ideas and perceptions otherwise hidden from our conscious minds. We're surprised by our own inventiveness. Through regular practice and reflection, we can develop habits of mind, heart, and eye that keep curiosity alive. Never be bored again. There's always more to observe, discover, and invent.
Never be bored again. It's nice. So where do you go from here? You've written this fabulous book. You want to get it out there, and then what do you do?
Well, I'm really excited that in the process of publicizing the book and letting people know about it, I've been doing some workshops and drawing with people, drawing together with people. I think that drawing has the ability to bring people together in ways that are really powerful. So I did a workshop a couple weeks ago at the Painting Center in New York City, where I was having a show of the drawings that made up the book, of the original drawings. And it's a whole collaborative process that we do, but it just brings people together in really strong ways. And one of the participants told me after the workshop that all of a sudden she had access to all kinds of feelings and memories that she usually kind of keeps closed up, and that it was a really powerful experience. So yeah, so I'm really interested in drawing people together.
Drawing people together and drawing with people.
Drawing with people, right.
And when you start off, do you just hand people a blank sheet of paper? Do you make suggestions, like in a writing exercise, you would give people prompts?
Yeah, I have a series of prompts, and I generally have people start out individually, and then it's about a certain being in the present. It's a kind of mindfulness exercise often that I start with, and just like, what are you feeling right now at this moment, and how can you express that with marks and lines?
Just with marks and lines,
Yeah.
not with
Not with images, and not with, and I think that sort of levels the playing field, because people don't have to worry about representation. So that's one of the things I do. And then I have people kind of observe each other's drawings and kind of imitate them and connect them, and that is a way for people to pay attention to each other closely in a way that's nonverbal, and I think that's a really powerful experience.
And then do people share what they're doing? Is that what brings them together?
We combine the drawings, the individual drawings. There's different ways that I do it, but I'm really interested in collaborative processes. So there's people create smaller drawings, and then they're combined on like a larger sheet, and then they kind of extend and connect the different drawings. So
and then they keep drawing.
And they keep drawing, yeah. They keep drawing.
So you have this sort of starter stuff that you put together. Yeah. And do you do that randomly? You put the pages together? I mean,
no, I let people decide how they want to place their individual drawings on the larger sheet, and then I have them really like look at somebody else's line, and can you imitate? Can you observe it closely and pretend that you're that person, and sort of imagine how they were feeling when they made that line? And what that does immediately is give them this empathy, which I think can be a very strong experience, and it also expands their vocabulary of different kinds of lines and marks. So it does something just technical in terms of giving them access to a larger set of ways of making lines. And what inevitably results is that there's the challenge that I give them is make this drawing look like it was made by one person.
Oh.
So they really have to pay attention to each other in order to make that happen, and it's inevitably becomes some sort of space. Sometimes it looks like outer space, sometimes it looks like a garden, sometimes it looks like it's underwater, but without any representational images, it just evokes a sense of space, and that in itself is a really great discussion to have.
And in this group, in the workshop, how many people are there? How many drawers?
Well, somebody was asking me this because I was organizing one that's going to happen in a few weeks, and they were saying, what's the maximum number of people? And I think I've done it with as many as like 70. But in a particular group, maybe 3 or 4 people.
Okay, I was thinking 3 or 4. 70 sounds like a lot.
3 or 4 is a good number, yeah. Sometimes even 2 people together is enough to really make a very interesting work.
So do you take your workshop, say, into a group that's already formed, doing something else? Could you take your workshop into that group and use it for those people to get together?
I have, and I've had my students do that. As a way, kind of team building or
yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so that has been done, and I think it's also a way for people to get to know each other.
Oh yeah,
too. So that works well too.
It's like hugging.
Yeah, but what I like the best, what I find that works the best is when I have like experienced artists who really feel confident about their ability to make marks, mixed up with people who haven't drawn since they were like 5. And that always makes a really interesting combination.
So are those people intimidated by these people who have drawn all along?
No, I don't think so, because maybe they are at first, but I think the process has a logic to it, that there's a structure that is supportive and makes people feel comfortable, so yeah.
Right, yeah.
So you don't really have to know anything. And I mean, this brings me to another question. When people say, I have no talent, usually what it means is they have no skill. That, they drew until they were in 2nd or 3rd grade, and then nobody ever taught them anything beyond that. Right. And so I think this is a way to kind of jumpstart the learning process. How do we create space? How do we work with tone and pattern? How do we, make lines that are fast or slow? And
how do you?
You'll have to take one of my workshops.
Oh, I will.
Oh, great. That would be great. Yeah, I'm going to do one at the Dworsky Museum at SUNY New Paltz in a few weeks on November 12th. So, yeah. And hopefully we'll be doing more in the area. And as part, people ask me, like, do you want to give a talk? And I said, can I give a workshop? Can I have people draw? Because I think
It's
that's
much more interesting.
Yeah. It's much more interesting for me, for sure.
Yes, and that makes it more interesting for everyone else.
Yeah.
I think when you're using your hands to do things, it changes everything when you're in a group with other people rather than just talking.
Yes, yes.
Of course, we're just talking now. But I'm going to come to your workshop.
Okay, great. That'll be wonderful.
And bring my friends. So do you have another project in mind, or just are you planning to, what do you call it, like do this?
Well, unfortunately, I have a more than full-time job at SUNY New Paltz, which is right now quite demanding. If I had my druthers, I would just go around and draw with people. But I think in terms of what I'm interested in, what I want to do next is exactly what we were just talking about, figuring out ways of using drawing to bring people together and to build understanding and empathy and just be fully human, because you were talking about the hand. And I think that as humans, we have these remarkable hands that have been so taken away from us over the past 40, 50 years. You know, like when I was growing up, my dad had a workbench. He made stuff in the basement. You know, my sister, I had another sister who was really into knitting and crocheting, and my sister who drew also made her own clothes, and that wasn't unusual, you know. Now you go into schools and children in like 3rd or 4th grade don't even know how to use a pair of scissors, because everything, so much of being human has been taken away from us. And I think the way that we think and work with our hands and the pleasure that brings us is something that I think it's very important to bring back.
How did that get taken away from us? Is that because of electronics, TV, movies? What is it?
Yeah, I think it's about the consumer society, the sort of, you know, they want us to not make our own clothes. They want us to sell us fast fashion, you know? And it's true that, you know, you buy something at Target, it's a lot faster than like trying to make it yourself. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just the incredible economic forces that have turned us into consumers rather than producers. And it's very interesting because, like, for all the terrible things that the pandemic brought upon us, I think people discovered the joy of making
doing
things.
Yeah,
yes, sourdough, whether it's bread or, you know, knitting or whatever it was, that people realized that this is a source of deep pleasure for us as humans to make stuff.
Right, yes. The people in my family made stuff, like everything.
Yeah.
And never thought about, of course I'm older than you, but never thought of tossing something out because it was broken.
Right.
Everything could be fixed.
Right. Like even people used to fix their own cars like not that long ago, and now there's just no way.
Yes, in my family they did.
Yeah.
And they fixed other things, and they built walls, and they took care of chickens. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it grew their own food. My mother had a garden in the back, and we ate fresh, you know, fruit and vegetables all summer long. It was great. Right. But yeah, and so I think drawing is just a really simple way. It's a really accessible, simple way of bringing that pleasure of making something with your hands.
Yeah, I feel that excitement in my hands. Yes, very much. I started drawing after I hadn't drawn for many years, and I had been through years of not feeling whole. And I started to draw. I was not in great circumstances, and I started drawing on the walls. And what I drew were sun faces, which I understand, or I understood at the time after I did that. Someone told me that that's the first image that children draw because it's the parent or the caretaker, and it's hands, arms, and legs sticking out. and that's what the sun face represented.
Mm-hmm.
And that just tuned me right in. And I was taking care of small children, my small children, at the time, and they were playing in salt dough, in the kind of Play-Doh that you make
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Right.
They didn't have manufactured at that time.
Right.
And I realized that something had been taken from me,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't allowed to sculpt in my mashed potatoes as a child. And the salt dough was like heaven. It wasn't there. It turned out there wasn't anything I couldn't do in the salt dough.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a miracle. My hands, that's why I love that picture, that drawing of the hands with the tools coming out. My hands became tools, yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I was just teaching my students to make salt dough because they, they were wanting to work with Play-Doh. And I said, you can make your own. And they were like, it's such a revelation. They're really excited about that.
Right,
You don't need to buy all this stuff.
No,
Yeah.
no. And I made thousands of pieces in salt dough. And actually, because I didn't have any money, and those were I had salt and flour in my house and
Right.
water.
Right.
And it was a miracle. It
Right.
was a miracle for me. I had gone to Museum of Modern Art, and there was an exhibition where they had asked a lot of recognized artists to make something in dough.
Oh, interesting.
And I just a barn door opened in my brain. And then I made probably thousands of pieces.
Oh, and then what did you do with them?
I sold them.
Oh, really? Wow.
I sold them to a shop, the Upper East Side in New York City, a friend of a friend of a friend. It was a florist shop where very esteemed people shopped, and they showed my work, and they bought them from me like $2 and $3 a piece. It was, but there were a lot of them.
That's such a great story.
And I think the third year I did it, they said, don't use any yellow. It was just so arbitrary. And a lot of the figures that I do are suns and moons. And I took it as a challenge. It was freeing. It was marvelous to not use any yellow.
Right. Sometimes those restrictions can be very helpful.
It can be very helpful. They
Yeah.
just shoot you out in a different direction. So what else do you want to tell us about this book? Please pick it up. Please look at it.
Yeah, I'm really interested now that it's out there. It's very wide-ranging. I'm interested in a lot of things. So it starts out with just thinking about cognitive science and drawing, the cognitive science of drawing. And there's some evolutionary psychology in there. There's anthropology. There's all kinds of different disciplines, I think, that use drawing or shed light on what drawing is all about. So I'm really interested in seeing what people pick up and what's useful or what's meaningful to the readers and viewers of the book. So I'm really looking forward to that, hearing from people.
Well, I'm very impressed with this book, as I've said, and it's available in most bookstores, right?
Yeah, and really, if you go to my website, which is just my name, AndreaKantrowitz.com, I have links to a whole bunch of different websites, not just Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but you can actually get it. Did I say something bad about Target? You can buy it at Target and Walmart and at your local independent bookstore. So it's widely available.
It's available.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm delighted. I'm delighted with the book. I'm delighted to speak with you. I want to say, do you have anything else you want to say? I'm just floored. You have so much information. I don't know what to ask you.
Well, this has been really fun, and it's been really affirming to me to hear your story about the salt dough, because I think it's all about that. It's not, I've focused on drawing just because I think it's so accessible and available, and if you don't have a pencil and paper, you can draw with a stick in the sand. It's something that's there. But I think that the pleasure of it extends into, as we were talking about before, into poetry, into sculpture, into a lot of other creative activity, and just I guess the thing that I live for, my mission in life, is to bring that back to people. That's who we are as humans. We are creative. Like, people will say, the two things people will say, they say, I don't have any talent, and say, I'm not creative.
I hate that.
And that's just such nonsense, because to get up out of bed in the morning, you never know what to expect. You're always in situations where you have to make sense of something that maybe doesn't really make sense. You have to figure out how to feel your way forward in a very complex and changing world. And we all face that. So every day, each one of us are creative, and I want, if my book can play some small part in people feeling like they're, take ownership of that again, that would be a beautiful thing.
And all little children are creative.
Right. So what happens, right? We need to hold on to that.
Hold on to that.
Yeah.
That pleasure.
Right.
Of being creative.
Right.
Well, I love having you as my guest. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I'm delighted with your book.
Oh, thanks so much. It's been delightful for me as well. It's a really fun conversation.
Andrea.
So, yeah.
Tonight's guest on Words Carry Us from Greenkill has been Andrea Kantrowitz. I always have to imagine seeing your name written out before I can pronounce it.
Okay.
So I do that in my mind, and that time I didn't. And it's written out right
it's
here.
It's phonetic.
Yeah. I'll start again. Tonight's guest on Words Carry Us from Greenkill has been Andrea Kantrowitz, artist, associate professor of art education, and author. Her latest book, the newly released Drawing Thought. The current exhibition here at Greenkill Gallery continues for the month of October, featuring artists Edward Burkheis, Karen Capobianco, and Wayne Montecalvo through October 29th. Vito DeSalvo is the featured artist at Greenkill for November and December. The exhibition runs from Saturday, November 5th, through Saturday, December 31st. Opening party Saturday, November 5th, from 5 to 7 p.m. Exhibition hours are from 3 to 5:30, Tuesday through Saturday. You may make special arrangements by calling 347-689-2323. Located at 229 Greenkill Avenue in Kingston, New York, Greenkill is a public arts, performance, and education space. For more information about exhibitions, as well as live stream and live audience events, email us at 229greenkill@greenkill.org. As always, we are grateful to David Schell, who organizes, directs, and makes things happen here at Greenkill. Our thanks go to Shirley Hoffman-Warren, who composed and performed our musical theme, and to recording engineer Jason Warren. Many thanks to you for tuning in and for watching us on YouTube. And very special thanks to tonight's in-studio audience. Our guest tonight on Words Carry Us, live stream from Greenkill, has been SUNY New Paltz Associate Professor Andrea Kantrowitz. Thanks to you for tuning in and finding us on YouTube. I hope you've enjoyed Words Carry Us for October 23rd. I am your host, Betty MacDonald. Greenkill out.